everybody, Olive here, and today I'd like to do something a little bit different. Today I'd like to talk about the concept of going child-free, meaning not having kids, of course. I'd like to talk about two books that I read that talk about this subject, and then I'd like to have a little bit of a discussion. Before I go on, I'd like to do a little bit of a disclaimer. Although the title of this video will have the word child-free in it, and while I myself am choosing not to have children, this is not something I'm advocating. I am not speaking against having children. Kids are great. I personally have worked in childcare. I know how great kids can be. But just personally for me, it's not the best choice. And it seems as though, and the numbers show, that more and more people, specifically in the Western world, are choosing this lifestyle. So today I want to talk a little bit about the facts regarding this, to talk a little bit about the numbers, not too heavy, about the fact that people are having less children. I'd like to talk a little bit about why people are having less children. And then more importantly, I want to talk about why it matters. In the past few weeks, I've read two books that discuss this topic. The first of those is Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed, 16 Writers on Their Decision Not to Have Kids. And the second is What to Expect When No One's Expecting, America's Coming Demographic Disaster by Jonathan V. Last. I'm going to go back and forth in discussing these two books because they will tackle different parts of what I hope to talk about in this video. In What to Expect When No One's Expecting, Last talks about how overall in the majority of Western countries, and it's more of a worldwide trend, the fertility rate is going down. Fertility rate meaning the number of babies people are having. Now, this may seem confusing to some people. In fact, I found it rather confusing at first because as we go on every single year, we see our world population continue to go up. And we have all, I'm sure at one point, heard about the dangers of overpopulation. Last confronts this and says that overpopulation isn't really a huge deal. In fact, we are really at risk for a shrinking population. The reason why we see a continued increase every year of our world's overall population is because of something called demographic momentum, meaning that the world population keeps going up even though people are having less and less babies because people are still around from previous generations. If you think specifically in America, we have all the baby boomers, a huge explosion in the population, particularly in the 1950s in America. Quick aside, I wore this headscarf in honor of the baby boomers in the 50s. So we had that giant population explosion and then people continue to have babies, so the population keeps going up. What we're not realizing though, however, is these baby boomers are continuing to age. And as morbid as this sounds, when they die off, our population is going to be shrinking because our fertility levels in America and in many countries throughout the world right now are not at replacement levels. Replacement level is a pretty straightforward term that is just essentially means that we are not having enough babies to make up for the numbers of people that are dying every day. This really wasn't meant to be as morbid as I'm making it. Not only is this a problem in America where we have a below replacement level fertility level, there are a lot of countries in Europe, Western and Eastern both, that have below replacement level fertility rates. Some of them are at such critical levels that maybe in the next 20 years, there are going to be losses in the millions worth of population. Countries in particular where this is a big problem are, of course, the United States, Italy, Japan, and Russia. There are many more on that list. Those are just the ones I chose to highlight. So now that we know that this is a big problem, I think we need to ask ourselves why. Why are people choosing to have less children? And this is somewhat covered in What to Expect When No One's Expecting, but it's also really apparent by reading Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed, which are 16 essays by professional writers about why they chose not to have children. This was a very interesting collection because it seemed like every single writer had their own approach as to why they didn't want to have kids. Some of it was just timing, and of course that's a big part of it, is that people are pushing marriage and childbearing until later and later in life, which then limits the amount of childbearing years ahead of you, meaning that people are just naturally going to have less children. Some people just don't like children, which in that particular set of essays was not really the biggest issue that was brought up. Most often in this collection, it's that people are very, very aware of what they need to give up in order to have children. Whether this be money, time, freedom, you name it, and it probably works against the idea of having children. Let's just run down the list of some of the reasons why a person may decide not to have kids. There is the astronomical price tag that goes along with having kids. This goes beyond food, clothing, and healthcare, because nowadays we need to be hyper aware of the rising cost of education and also the huge amount of money spent on childcare. Not only are childcare and education not included in official estimates of the money required to raise a child in the modern day, what is not included, that is a really, really big issue, is the foregone income of specifically mothers who are going to stay at home and raise their child. If you're familiar with any terms in economics, you know this as opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the price tag attached to making one decision over another decision. So let's say you decide to go to college for 4 years. The opportunity cost of attending a 4-year university would be the price tag for that education, plus whatever income you could have earned in those 4 years if you weren't attending school full time. So if a mother is deciding to stay at home and raise her kids when she could have been making $80,000 a year, every year she decides to stay home from work and raise the children, she's losing $80,000. Every year that goes by, that's more money lost, more money that you're technically putting into your child. Now that more and more women are pursuing careers outside of the home, more of them are career focused, more of them are unwilling to make that sacrifice. They are unwilling to pay the opportunity cost. So if you add those 3 essential costs to the already huge USDA estimates about what it costs to raise one child, you're looking at over a cool $1 million US dollars to raise one child into adulthood. Since we're talking about education costs, because they continue to rise at insane levels, that means all of us who go to college, which is almost a necessity nowadays, are in a huge amount of debt when we graduate, and that takes a long time, if ever, to pay off. I think we can assume from this that people are going to put off having kids until they've at least tried to pay off some of their debt. Since raising a child is so expensive, who wants to do that when they have a load of debt? They're going to push having kids later, and then their kids presumably will be in the same situation. So it does not bode well for future generations. Going back to the point that more and more women are becoming more educated and seeking work outside of the home, there is a direct correlation between the level of education of women and the fertility rate in a country. So the more a woman has invested in herself by going out and getting an education, spending time on her career, then she is going to be less and less willing to give that up to raise a child. Raising a kid is also a ton of work. It seems as though people are just less and less willing to put in the amount of time and energy that it takes to raise a child. It's not particularly fun work, and while it can be rewarding, it can also be incredibly frustrating. So less and less people are willing to sign themselves on for such hard work. Also, access to birth control has really, really changed the game. People now have a choice if they're faced with an unexpected pregnancy. I just retweeted an article from The Economist that talks about sex-selective abortions, specifically in India and China. As you may know, in China, there is a one-child policy in which a couple is not allowed to have more than one child. China, being a more manufacturing and agricultural economy, mainly wants boys. This article has suggested that there is a loss of 109 million girls because of the number of sex-selective abortions. So let's talk a little bit about why this matters. A lot of people, including myself, upon first glance, would see a shrinking world population as a good thing. We have billions of people on this planet, about 7 billion right now. And a lot of places in this world are very overcrowded. So at first glance, it seems like good. Less people, less demands on our planet, that's a good thing. Not always the case though. Specifically in America, where we have governmental programs such as Medicare and Social Security, we need young people who are working to be paying taxes into these programs so that people who are of retirement age can reap the benefits of a system that they paid into. Less young people less workers means not enough money to fund these programs. It is also very significant when people start having less children in that the age structure of the population gets very warped. It becomes top-heavy in that there are more people who are older than there are people who are younger, meaning there are less young people to support the old people, not just through governmental programs, but physically speaking. What happens to these older people if they did not have children? Who takes care of them? What to Expect When No One's Expecting was an incredibly interesting read, and I would highly recommend it. However, I do think at points it's a little bit alarmist. Of course, it's fair to say that nothing good has ever come of a shrinking population. Of course, he's right in saying that nothing good, historically speaking, has ever come of a shrinking population. However, the examples that it feels like he's pointing at are all in the very, very distant past, and we live in a very different world now. I see both positives and negatives to a shrinking population. The UN is treating it as a non-issue, that it seems like the entire world population is going to start shrinking in a very short period of time. But certain countries are certainly reacting. Countries like Singapore, Japan, and Russia are all trying to incentivize people to have more babies. But as Last notes in his book, it seems like the damage is already done. People like living without children. There's a term called DINK, which are married couples, dual income, no kids, which means two people working, earning incomes, enjoying a consumeristic lifestyle free of children. People like focusing on their careers. People like the freedom that not having children provides. And so attaching incentives to a very hard and lifelong job, I'm just not sure it's going to work. As you may have heard me say, I am choosing not to have children for many of the reasons that I've discussed in this video. But of course, as a concerned citizen of the world, it is a little bit alarming of what a shrinking population may mean. I do think, however, that we'll find a way to deal with it. We have up until this point. I don't have any reason to think why we won't find a way to figure out how to make the world work with less people in it. So that was a little bit of a discussion on going child-free and what it means for our worlds. Both of these books were fantastic reads. I would highly recommend both of them. I will link to both of their Goodreads profiles in the description box below. Also below you will find links to any source or article that I've discussed in this video. Please, if you have any comments or stand on one side of this issue or were surprised to hear anything that I discussed in this video, please, please, please leave a comment. I am totally open to discussion. This was such an awesome learning experience for me. And now that I'm having my little expert moment, I'd love to talk about it with all of you. You can leave a comment. You can find me on Twitter at @abookolive. If you feel so inclined, you can find me on Instagram, also at @abookolive, and the link to my Goodreads, as always, is down below if you'd like to be friends. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.